A 19-year-old black boy in a paint-stained jacket walked into the Hargrove Music Institute on a Tuesday afternoon in November, carrying a violin case held shut with a bungee cord, and asked the woman at the front desk if he could play for a meal. She laughed first, then the man behind her laughed. Then the students in the hallway who had heard it slowed their steps and laughed, too, the way people laugh when something confirms what they already believed about the world. He stood there and let them finish. Lennox Farrow had been standing outside the institute for 35 minutes. Before he pushed the door open, he had watched through the tall glass windows, while students in pressed shirts carried instrument cases that cost more than the car his mother had driven before it stopped running. He had watched a teacher in a charcoal blazer pause in the corridor to correct a young woman's bow hold with 2 fingers, gently. The way you touch something you know is valuable. He had not planned to go inside. He had planned to keep walking to the shelter on Clement Street, which opened at 5 and served dinner at 5:30, and he had planned to eat whatever they were serving without looking at it too hard, the way he had every night for the past 6 weeks. But then a student near the window had begun playing something, a Brahms intermezzo he recognized from a recording his grandmother had kept on a cassette tape she played every Sunday morning. And his feet had simply stopped. His fingers had moved at his side, following the left hand on the invisible strings. He had been playing since he was 7. His grandmother, Evelyn Farrow, had found the violin in a church rummage sale in Baltimore for $4.50, and she had carried it home on the bus in her lap, and she had set it on the kitchen table in front of him and said, "That is yours now. Don't you dare waste it." He had not wasted it. He had practiced in the kitchen while she cooked. He had practiced in the stairwell of their building because the acoustics were better. He had practiced through 3 school transfers, 2 neighborhood changes, and the long, difficult year after his grandmother got sick. He had practiced at the group home after she died, until the staff told him the other residents were complaining. And then he had practiced in the parking lot behind the building at hours when the complaining wouldn't reach anyone. He had aged out of the system in August. He was 19 now, which meant the state was done with him, which meant the cold was his own problem, which meant the bungee cord on the case was going to have to hold a little longer. He pushed the door open. The woman at the front desk was named Patricia, according to the nameplate. She was somewhere in her 50s, with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, and the kind of expression that came from spending 30 years at telling people where they were not supposed to be. She looked at his jacket. She looked at the case. She looked at his shoes, which were dry but barely. "Can I help you?" He had practiced what he was going to say. He had practiced it outside on the sidewalk, saying it quietly under his breath so the words would not catch when he needed them. "Yes, ma'am. I'm wondering if someone here might let me play. I haven't eaten today, and I thought maybe." She cut him off with a laugh that was not unkind, exactly, but was not kind either. It was the laugh of a woman who had heard something she found both surprising and predictable. And the man behind her at the filing cabinet heard it and joined in, and the 2 students in the corridor slowed and looked and smiled at each other. Lennox lowered his eyes. He had practiced the bracing too. "I'm sorry," Patricia said, not sounding sorry. "This is a private institution. We're not set up for that kind of thing." A door at the end of the corridor opened. A man in his 60s came out, heavy-set, with a white dress shirt and a burgundy tie, and the careful bearing of someone who had been important for long enough that it had settled into his posture. He looked at Lennox the way men like him often looked at boys like Lennox, with a kind of theatrical patience that made the looking itself the insult. "What's the situation, Patricia?" Young man was asking if he could play for food, Mr. Aldridge. Dale Aldridge raised an eyebrow. He looked Lennox over once from the jacket to the case. "Is that right?" It was not a question. "Son, do you know what this institute is?" "Yes, sir. It's a conservatory. It is the oldest private conservatory in this part of the state. Our students audition from across the country. We've placed musicians in the Boston Philharmonic, the Chicago Symphony." "I know," Lennox said. "My grandmother had a recording of a violinist who trained here. She played it every Sunday. Aldridge looked at him. He was deciding something. Lennox could see him deciding it, could see the moment the decision tipped from dismissal into entertainment. Well, Aldridge spread his hands. By all means, let's hear it. If you can play, we'll see about getting you something from the kitchen. If you can't, he glanced at Patricia and smiled. You'll have had a warm place to stand for 5 minutes. He gestured at the small reception area. He was already turning to make sure the corridor students would stay to watch. Lennox set the case on the bench by the door. He undid the bungee cord. He opened the case. The violin inside was old enough that the varnish had gone amber in patches, and the scroll was worn smooth at the tip. It had a crack along the upper bout that a luthier in Baltimore had repaired with hide glue 20 years ago, and there was a small chip missing from the edge of the top plate where it had once been dropped. Every working part of it was in good order. Lennox had made sure of that. He lifted it out. He tucked it under his chin. He rosined the bow once, twice, with the automatic motion of someone who had done it so many times it happened below conscious thought. He did not warm up. He did not play scales. He looked once at the middle distance the way his grandmother had told him to look when he was nervous. Not at them, not at the floor, at the place just past where they're standing, and then he played. He played the first movement of the Beethoven violin concerto. He did not play it from the beginning. He started at the cadenza, the long unaccompanied passage that most young players approached like a formal announcement, and most serious players approached like a confession. He played it the way his grandmother had described it, the first time she had played him the recording, like a man talking to himself about something that matters. 20 seconds in, the corridor was silent. 30 seconds in, Patricia had set down the pen she had picked up. A door opened somewhere deeper in the building. Then another. He played for 4 minutes. He played through the cadenza and back into the recapitulation, and then he stopped at the place where the orchestra would come back in. Because there was no orchestra, and because 4 minutes was enough. He lowered the bow. He looked at Aldridge. Aldridge's mouth was slightly open. He closed it. He cleared his throat. He looked at Patricia as if she might have an explanation. She did not. A woman had appeared in the corridor behind him. She was in her late 40s, with dark hair pulled back, and the kind of still, focused attention that belonged to someone who spent her working life listening. She held a pencil she had apparently forgotten she was holding. She was looking at Lennox the way the silver-haired woman in the chess club had looked, which is to say without pity and without condescension, which is a specific kind of looking that is rarer than it should be. Her name was Giselle Harmon, which Lennox would not know for another 5 minutes, and she was the Institute's director of strings, which he also did not know, and she had been in the practice corridor 20 feet away when he started playing, and she had stopped moving after the first 8 bars. "Where did you study?" she asked from the corridor. "My grandmother taught me, and I had a school teacher for 3 years. Your school had a strings program?" "No, ma'am. He ran one after school in his classroom. He stopped when the funding got cut." Harmon walked slowly into the reception area. She looked at the violin. She looked at Lennox. "May I?" She held out her hand for the instrument. He passed it to her. She turned it over, looked at the repaired crack, looked at the peg box, plucked each string to check the tuning, which was nearly perfect. "This violin is 40 years old," she said. "Yes, ma'am. It was my grandmother's." She handed it back. "The Joachim cadenza," she said. "You transposed it down a half step." He hesitated. "The E string on this instrument runs a little bright. The transposition evens out the projection across registers." She looked at him for a long time. Aldridge had not moved. He was standing with his hands in his pockets and his face arranged into something that was trying to be composed and not quite getting there. "Well," he said finally, "that was impressive. Patricia, get the young man something from the kitchen." He buttoned his jacket. "Beginner's luck," he said to the room rather than to Lennox, and went back through the door he had come out of. Patricia brought him a plate of food in the small waiting area off the reception. A sandwich, a bowl of soup, a glass of water, a cup of coffee. She set it down without ceremony and went back to her desk, and she did not look at him while he ate. But she also did not look away from him the way people sometimes did. the way that made you feel like a problem to be waited out. Harmon sat across from him. She watched him eat for a moment, then looked at her pencil as if she had just remembered it. "Tell me about your grandmother," she said. His throat closed a little. He kept eating, slowly, because he had learned what happened when you ate too fast after too long without. She played when she was young. In church, mostly. She stopped when she had kids, and then she picked it up again after my grandfather died. She said it was the only thing that was just hers, and she taught you. Every afternoon I came home from school until I was 14. Then she started having trouble with her shoulder, and she'd just sit and tell me what I was doing wrong. What happened to her? She died 3 years ago. Kidney failure. Harmon was quiet for a moment, and since then, he told her the short version: group homes, aging out, the shelter on Clement Street, the violin in his lap every night because the case was the only thing he was certain would still be there in the morning. She listened. She did not write anything down. She did not perform sympathy or manufacture concern. She listened the way serious musicians listen to music, with her whole body slightly forward and very still. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes, ma'am. The Beethoven. That's a 90-minute concerto with full orchestral support, usually performed after years of conservatory training. Why did you start there?" He looked at the soup. He looked at her. "My grandmother used to say that if you walk into a room where you don't think you belong, you don't walk in apologizing. You walk in playing the thing you know best. So they understand right away what they're dealing with." Harmon looked at him for a long time. "Right," she said quietly, as if to herself. "Right. He slept that night in the shelter on Clement Street, the same as always. But in the morning, there was a message on the community phone at the front desk, left for him, from a number he didn't recognize. It was Harmon. She asked him to come back. He went back at 9 o'clock with the violin and the bungee cord and his jacket that smelled like the shelter's industrial detergent. The institute was different in the morning. Students moved through the corridors with coffee cups and sheet music. Someone was doing scales somewhere above him. Slowly, carefully, the same 3-note pattern over and over until it sat right. Harmon was waiting for him in a practice room on the 2nd floor. She had set 2 chairs facing each other and a music stand between them. "I spoke to our board chair last night," she said, "and to 2 of the faculty." She paused. "There is some disagreement about next steps." He said nothing. "Mr. Aldridge would like to offer you what he's calling an informal arrangement. A few sessions a week in one of the practice rooms, access to our music library, and meals from the kitchen when you come in. He's been speaking with our development office this morning about how to frame it." She stopped. He used the phrase discovery story 3 times in 20 minutes. Lennox looked at the music stand. "What does that mean?" "It means the Institute had some difficult press coverage this spring. A former student filed a complaint about the scholarship selection process. There was an article. Aldridge believes your presence here, handled correctly, could help with that." The room was quiet. Somewhere in the building, the student doing scales had moved on to something harder. "And what do you think?" Lennox asked. She set her pencil down on the stand. She looked at him directly. "I think you are one of the most naturally gifted young violinists I have heard in 20 years of teaching. I think you should be in a training program, not an informal arrangement. And I think you deserve to know exactly what room you're walking into, before you walk into it." He nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." She rose. "There is a practice room down the hall with a Steinway. The pianist who usually has it isn't in on Tuesdays. You can use it this morning if you want." She moved toward the door. "I'll be in my office if you have questions." He spent 3 hours in that room. He played through everything he knew, and some things he half knew, and a few things he was only beginning to understand. He played until his shoulder ached, and then he played a little past that. Because his grandmother had told him that the ache was the instrument reminding you that you were actually doing the thing, and not just performing the idea of doing it. What happened next happened in the way of institutions, slowly and behind doors he was not in. He found out later from a student named Owen who had been at the Institute for 2 years and had taken it upon himself to fill Lennox in on what he called the actual architecture of this place. that Aldridge had begun making calls the evening after the audition. Not to music contacts, to donors, to board members, to the editor of a regional arts magazine who was a personal friend. The phrase discovery story had apparently been used quite a bit. He also found out from Harmon that a formal emergency scholarship vote had been called for the following week, a thing that had happened twice in the Institute's history. He found out that 3 of the 7 board members were in favor, 2 were uncertain, and 1, a man named Nolan Presley, who had been a major donor for 11 years, was vocally opposed. He found out that Presley's opposition centered on what Presley called verification concerns and the integrity of the admissions process, phrases that were careful enough that you could say them in a room without them meaning what they meant. He also found out from Owen, who had grown up in this city and knew its histories, that there was a man named Raymond Farrow, a violinist, who had applied to the Hargrove Institute in 1979 and been told his application had been received too late for that cycle, and that he should apply again the following year. He had applied again. He had never received a response. Raymond Farrow was Lennox's grandfather. He had not known his grandfather played. His grandmother had never said. He thought about why she might not have said. And then he thought about the recording she had kept, the one of a violinist who had trained here. And he thought about how she had listened to it on Sunday mornings with her eyes closed and her hands very still in her lap. And he understood something he had not understood before. He understood what she had been listening for. On Thursday evening, he came back to return a piece of sheet music Harmon had lent him and took the back staircase because the front corridor was crowded with students heading to an evening ensemble rehearsal. The board meeting room was on the 2nd floor at the end of the east wing. He was not going there. He was passing it. The door was not fully closed. The timing is extraordinary, Dale. That's exactly my point. The timing is what it is. We had the article in April. We had 3 board resignations in May. The scholarship numbers are down 18%. That's not. I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm saying the optics here could not be more favorable if we'd arranged them ourselves. A young man off the street, the grandmother connection, the self-teaching, all of it. And if we offer him a full scholarship, it says everything we need to say about who this institution is. A third voice, quieter than the others. And what does it say to him? Silence. He is 19 years old. He has been sleeping in a shelter. We are discussing what his presence here says to the public. I am asking what we intended to say to him. That was Harmon's voice. Giselle, he gets what he came in here for. Training, resources, a future. He came in here for a sandwich. Her voice was level, not angry. Level was worse. He did not come in here to repair our reputation. The sheet music was suddenly very heavy in Lennox's hands. He stood in the hallway outside that door for what he would later estimate was 20 seconds. He did not go in. He did not run. He walked back down the stairs the same way he had come up, and he went out through the service exit by the kitchen, and he walked to the shelter on Clement Street, and he sat on his cot with the violin case in his lap and did not open it. He was awake most of the night. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about the cassette tape. He thought about the $4.50. Before dawn, he got up, put on his jacket, and walked out of the shelter with the case and the bungee cord, and left the sheet music on the front desk, because it belonged to Harmon and not to the Institute, and he wanted that distinction to mean something. He went to the public park on Delaney Street, which had a covered pavilion that kept the wind off, and he sat at one of the picnic tables and opened the case and began to play. He had nowhere specific to be. He played the things his grandmother had loved first, the slow ones, the Sunday morning ones. He played until a man walking a dog stopped to listen, and then stayed for 10 minutes. He played until a woman in scrubs coming off a night shift sat on the bench across the pavilion and ate her breakfast and did not say anything but also did not leave. He played until Harmon found him. She came across the park from the street entrance with her coat open and her scarf unwound. She had clearly come quickly. She sat onto the bench across the picnic table without a word and let him finish the phrase he was in the middle of. When he stopped, she said, "I know what you heard." He set the bow across his knee. "I said it," she said. I said, "And what does it say to him?" And then I sat there while they kept talking, and I did not leave the room. That is the part I came here to tell you, because you would have heard the first half and not the second, and the second half was what I need to own. She looked at the instrument in his hands. I knew what they were doing. I said one thing, then I let it keep going. He did not speak. "I am not here to bring you back," she said. "That is your decision. I am here because I could not let you believe that nobody in that room understood what was wrong with what we were saying. Somebody did. She was just too cautious to say it loudly enough to matter." She paused. "I am sorry for that." He looked at the violin. He looked at the scratched amber varnish, the repaired crack, the worn scroll tip. "My grandfather applied to the institute," he said. She was very still. "In 1979. They told him his application was late. He never got in." He looked at her. "I didn't know until 2 days ago. My grandmother never told me, but she had a recording. She played it every Sunday. A violinist who studied there." His voice was steady. He had decided it was going to be steady. I think she kept listening to what could have been his. Harmon put one hand on the edge of the picnic table. She did not speak for a moment. What was his name? Raymond Farrow. She was quiet for a long time. "Sit with me for a minute," she said. He sat. She told him something he had not expected her to know. She told him that there was a faculty photograph from 1978 on the wall of the East Corridor on the 3rd floor, a row of instructors in academic gowns in front of the building's original arched entrance. She told him she had walked past it every day for 9 years without looking at it closely. She told him that after Owen had come to her office the afternoon before, after Owen had told her what he'd told Lennox about Raymond Farrow, she had gone upstairs and looked at the photograph for a long time. She told him that the man standing at the far right of the photograph, the one with his hand resting on the shoulder of the man next to him, was named Clarence Aldridge, Dale Aldridge's father. He had been the admissions chair in 1979. The wind moved through the pavilion. Somewhere across the park, a kid was kicking a soccer ball against a wall in the slow rhythm of someone practicing alone. Lennox thought about his grandmother's hands on the cassette player. He thought about the way she had looked on Sunday mornings, sitting very still in the kitchen chair, with her eyes closed, listening to someone else play what her husband should have played. He thought about what she had said to him the last time he had visited her, in the hospital, when the violin was in the bag at his feet, and she had made him take it out and play her something, even though the nurses had looked uncertain, and she had waved them off. "You don't play to prove anything to them," she had said. Her voice by then was very thin, the way water gets thin when it's very cold. "You play because it's yours. The music is yours. They don't get to decide that." He looked at Harmon. "What would the terms be," he said, "if I came back?" "My terms." She looked at him carefully. "Tell me." The negotiations took 9 days. Harmon handled them. She was not on the board, which made certain things harder and other things cleaner. Lennox's terms were written on 3 sheets of notebook paper in handwriting that was not particularly neat, because he had written them sitting on a pavilion bench in a park in November, and he was not going to rewrite them, just to make them easier to dismiss. There would be a full scholarship, not an informal arrangement, not a trial period. A full scholarship with all the conditions that applied to any other enrolled student. There would be a name change for the Institute's new community outreach program, which Aldridge had been calling the Hargrove Discovery Initiative. It would be called the Raymond Farrow Strings Program, after his grandfather, who had applied to this institute in 1979, whose application had not been lost, and whose name would appear in the program materials, on the studio door, and on a small plaque in the East Corridor near the 1978 faculty photograph. The program would fund instrument access and coaching for young players from neighborhoods without arts funding, selected by audition with a panel that included at least one musician from those neighborhoods. Lennox would not be photographed for any institutional press materials. He would not be quoted in any press release or donor newsletter without his explicit written consent for each individual use. He would not be referred to as a discovery. He would be referred to, if referred to at all, by his name. The scholarship vote was held on the 9th day. It passed. Aldridge voted in favor, which Harmon told Lennox afterward, and which Lennox received without comment, because some things you put in a file in your mind and close the drawer. Presley resigned from the board the same afternoon. He sent a letter citing concerns about institutional direction. Harmon told Lennox this too, and this one he received with something closer to a feeling, though he did not name it out loud. Owen stopped him in the corridor 3 days later and told him, with the slightly breathless energy of someone who had been waiting to deliver news, that Presley's grandfather had also served on the admissions committee. In the late 1970s, Lennox looked at him. "I know," he said. He had figured it out. He had just been letting himself know it slowly. The regional competition was held in February at the Whitfield Arts Center, in a recital hall with good acoustics and a full house and cameras. Lennox had agreed to be in the range of, for photographs of himself only, with the trophy, once. He came in wearing a dark green shirt that Harmon had suggested and slacks he had bought with his own money from a second-hand shop on Archer Street. He had refused the suit. The case was over his shoulder, bungee cord and all, because Harmon had tried once to suggest a proper case and he had thanked her and declined. Owen was in the 3rd row with 2 other students. Harmon was in the 4th row, end seat, with a woman Lennox recognized as the program director of a youth music nonprofit who had written him a letter the week before. The chair next to Harmon was empty. He had asked her about it the day before when she had told him the seat assignments. "I left it open," she had said simply, "in case you needed somewhere to put your eyes." He played the Brahms violin concerto in D major. He played the 2nd movement, the Adagio, which was the movement his grandmother had hummed while washing dishes, not all the way through, just the opening melody, over and over, the way you hum something when it has moved far enough into you that it comes out without your deciding. He played it from the beginning this time. No shortcuts. All of it. By the end of the 1st movement, the hall was the kind of quiet that is different from silence, the kind where people have stopped thinking about being in a hall and have started simply being inside the music. He won. Afterward, when the hall had cleared out and the other competitors had left, and the staff was folding chairs, he sat back down at the front of the stage with the violin in his lap. He did not take it apart yet. He sat with it the way you sit with something after a long time apart. He thought about his grandmother at the kitchen table, $4.50, a rummage sale in Baltimore. He thought about his grandfather in 1979, application in hand, being told a door was closed. He thought about a cassette tape playing on a Sunday morning in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and something sweet, and an old woman sitting with her hands in her lap and her eyes closed, listening. He thought about what she had been listening for, and he thought about the fact that she had waited for him in the only way she could, by keeping the music alive until someone who carried her blood could walk through the door she had always meant for them to walk through. He folded the violin into the case. He fastened the bungee cord. He shouldered the bag and walked out through the stage door into the February night, and the air was cold enough that his breath showed, and the street was quiet, and somewhere a few blocks over a car was playing music with its windows down, something with a deep bass line and a melody riding high above it, and the two sounds moved together through the cold air in a way that should not have worked and did. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time. Then he started to walk. Back at the Institute, on the door of a small studio on the 1st floor of the East Wing, a sign had gone up that afternoon. It read, Raymond Farrow String Studio, below the name in smaller letters, in memory of Raymond Farrow, 9/41/1991. He should have been here. The student who had installed it, a second year named Blythe, who was on the facilities committee and had insisted on doing it herself, had added that last line without clearing it with anyone. Nobody took it down. If you stayed with Lennox all the way to the end, thank you for that. The quiet ones, the ones who carry something for years without being asked to put it down, those are the stories worth telling slowly. If something in this moved you, subscribe so you find the next one when it's ready. And before you go, we want to hear from you. Have you ever carried something that belonged to someone who never got to use it? Have you ever walked through a door that was always meant for you but took a generation to open? Tell us in the comments. Some of the best stories on this channel started as one line from someone who almost didn't write it. Maybe yours is next. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you in the next story.